Benchmade 551 Griptilian Old Faithful. And this guy, if it'll focus, there we go, 551 Male Pardue D2. And there's a story why I have a D2 blade in said orange handle. I'll get to that. Let me read off the specs on this and then go on from there. So the overall length is 8.07 inches, blade length of 3.45 inches, handle thickness of 4.62, or no, handle length of 4.62, blade thickness of 12 hundredths, handle thickness of 64 hundredths, weight of 3.82 ounces, and a price of $110 with your standard satin, or coated blade is $119. So it's $9 more for a coated blade. Differences, and then you also will have the G10 version of the 20 CV steel. And the differences are weight. So it's 4.17 for the G10 as opposed to 3.82 for the plastic. And the price is $178 as opposed to $110. And then a coat, that's for a satin blade, $178 for satin blade, 20 CV. Coated would probably be, I guess, $9-10 more, I think. And then as far as thickness goes, it's probably within 200ths or so. I'm not really sure. I guess I didn't. I should have double checked that. So this is one of my favorite knives. I figured I'd shoot a video on it. I don't know if it's really a review or not. It's been around a long time. There's many videos on it. I've had this knife now, as seen in this part of the picture, since 2015 or 14, 15 I think. I had a 154 CM blade on it with serrations, and it was kind of my practice blade for sharpening, and I used it a lot, and I kind of wore it down where I took care of the serrations, but the regular blade, the plain edge, was kind of starting to get up above the serrations. So, you know, I was getting a little awkward. And then, so I had a kind of a beat up tan Cabela's version, and I sent that in for a new blade because that blade was kind of dicked up too, and the handle was dicked up, and some of the screws were stripped. My fault. So I sent that in, and they replaced it. What I wanted was a hollow ground blade, plain edge hollow ground, you know, with the spider hole. But what happened was they could not do that. They could only send back that Cabela's handle because they're a little different. They're tan, like a regular Benchmade, but they have, instead of these dots, they're kind of these like indentations instead of raised parts. They're actually little indentations. So it's a Cabela's version. They had to send me back the same blade, and I was like, cool. So I'll take that D2. So I got a brand new D2 blade. So instead of leaving it on that beat up, still kind of beat up handle, I threw it in here, and I did that last fall. So I've been using this D2 blade since last fall. This is probably like the 4th or 5th pocket clip because they get all scratched up. I'll go ahead and throw on a clip off a knife that I replaced the clip on. You know, I'll get the black oxide clip, put on there, and then just kind of box up the painted one. So I have kind of several of those, and then when these ones kind of get all dicked up, I put a new painted one on there. So I've used this a lot, quite a bit actually. This blade I used a little this winter. I used it last fall for a lot of wood carving and such, and then this spring as well, quite a bit. And if I get that to focus, the only place I see wear on it, maybe a little, I don't know if it's really going to show up, a little along the edge, and the thumb studs are kind of, it's kind of getting worn off there. Now, my point on that is that actually I'm kind of impressed. I think their coating is better than it used to be. like back in the day, and actually the same coating that's on this, because this is like kind of a vintage, kind of an early 2000s ish. I think it's got that BT2 instead of the BK1 or whatever that's on these new ones. I don't really know, but I think that this coating is better than this, because my last knife I had, I mean, it was completely like worn off. This one's still kind of holding in there, but I do baby this because they don't make them anymore. So it's kind of, you know, I carry it, but I don't use it for carving or anything. It's kind of like my backup blade. Now, so this one actually, I think this coating is actually holding up better than the one that originally came on it, even just a few years ago. Could be wrong. Haven't cut any rope with it. Seems like cut rope, that's pretty abrasive on the coating. Just a bunch of pine, just a little bit of hardwood, minimal amount of juniper. So yeah, it's kind of, so the comparison, if I can get, is this. It's kind of like one of my other favorite carry knives. There are some differences. And I just shot a video on this, so I realized that I don't want to be redundant. But being that it's on the Griptilian here, I kind of have a case. This is not like a versus or anything, just kind of a comparison of size. So that's what it would look like in your pocket. And then this one, and you can see how much bigger of a footprint, as it were, this would have over that in the pocket. So that's what's cool about this knife. Blade lengths are the same exactly. This one is a little wider, as you can see, height wise. Okay, than that. It's got a full flat. This has got that saber 2/3 or so. And then you go down the primary grind. Well, 2/3 is primary, 1/3 of it, I guess you could say, is the flat there, the saber flat. And then as far as cutting, say behind the edge thickness, I don't know. I can't really in use on carving wood. I think on the Spydercos I can kind of detect that they're a little bit. I kind of did this on one video here shortly ago, but you kind of go a little shallower angle to get it to bite, barely over this, if this makes sense. Not much, pretty damn close actually. So I really like that. The blade that I had, the Griptilian blade that I had that's serrated, I never really liked it on wood carving. It was just a good all-around knife to use because it had those serrations. It was good on rope and such. And then you always had the plain edge out here for everything else. Kind of like I've always carried the AFOs, the same story. So I'm used to that. Been carrying knives like that for years. But lately, I've kind of started to appreciate having a plain blade the whole way. I think it's just better, actually. And probably not a lot of people disagree with that. But for the AFO, I like it because it's a work knife. I'll be using it on rope and stuff at inopportune moments, or opportune, depending on how you look at it. And that serrations sure do go through stuff like that quick. Or if you have something tough that you're trying to cut through, and the plain edge just is dull or not getting it done, the serrations then will take over. So as far as use goes, see if I can do this. As far as the blades, this will be kind of hard. See if I can, but sorry, my bad. And one's black and one's shiny, so you're not gonna really tell. But the distal taper wise, there's more of a taper to that Mannix blade, so it's a little thinner, it's a little finer. This one actually is a little thicker out there in the tip. If I get that to focus at all, maybe. I don't know if it really matters too much, but it's a little thicker, so it's gonna be a little bit more durable theoretically, in case you drop it, in case you stab it into something, in case you're prying something. I'm not really a knife prier. I personally don't really use them for that. Never broken a tip on a knife, and I don't really plan on starting now. So this is a pretty good all-around blade. It's thin enough that it's a good piercer. I've never even wanted more, but at the same time, I think it's tough enough to resist any kind of breakage. So I think as far as an all-around blade, it goes as awesome. And then like if you follow me on this, but that belly, it's 100% rocker. It looks like there's a flat here. It really isn't. If you put on something flat, like it rocks the whole way. So it's like 100% rocker. Granted, you get a lot more out here in the belly, out this way, as it swoops up to the tip. Nice drop point. It's got that kind of a cutout swedge, if you can pick that up. Coated blades are kind of hard for that. Well, I think it's just a great all-around knife. You know, Spydercos usually come, in my experience, I think they used to do a lot more saber grinds, but these days it's just all full flat grind, and that's fine. This one does add a little bit more to the, brings more to the table, a little bit more strength. Though I've never needed more personally, but it's there. And then I guess, I understand it, as far as the plunge grind goes, there really isn't one on these Griptilian blades. You can pick that up. Where Spydercos are straight, 90 degrees. And I guess that's a weak point if you are prying. If you did need to stick it into something to pry something open, theoretically, this is where it snapped. So if you're trying to wedge a car door open or something, you know, whatever. Obviously you don't want to be, if you're prying out here, that's probably going to break before here. But if you get it up into this point, you're prying on something, you might snap it there. So the Griptilian doesn't have that problem. And they're, as far as stock thicknesses go, I think they're about the same. I think they're that 12. They're both right in that 1200s range. Axis lock, stop pin, stop bar is pretty darn thick, honestly. And it is in steel, the steel liner part. All the action is embedded in this liner. Liner ends actually back here. I don't know if you kind of call it a rat tail, but here's your anchoring points here, and then it just kind of rests, gets wedged up in that handle. It's kind of, you can see the little cutouts back in there, kind of a waffle cutouts, wedged in there nicely. Zero blade play. I haven't oiled this for a while, but it's got free action, and I guess you'll have to take my word for it, but no, absolutely zero vertical up and down play. And then right now there is no side to side. If you don't have Loctite on the pivot bolt here and get loose, you will develop a little bit, but it's never much. Like it's never going to be a whole shitload of side to side, just like, you know, a micrometer. You'll be able to feel it, and you can just anchor it back in. The advice would be to put Loctite in there, because flicking this open does cause a lot of shock. I think it causes this to back out a little bit, though I've never actually had it back out all the way on any of my Axis knives. You just want to make sure you put Loctite in there. So I think it's an awesome knife. I think honestly on this guy, I have never done it, but a deep carry clip might be advisable. So this part up here is not sticking up, which I've never really minded it, but it's kind of gaudy. It's a kind of a gaudy orange color. So I have a couple deep carry clips, I think, that are not being used. I might eventually throw one of those on here. Kind of occurred to me the other day. This is always, it's not necessarily my tackle box, toolbox knife, but I do have it in my truck at all times, and then I'll just kind of sit on the tailgate and I'll just kind of use it for whatever I'm doing. It's kind of funny because I usually have a knife in my pocket too, but for whatever reason, this one's kind of like, if it's around, it's the first one I grab to work with. Just super ergonomic. I kind of discussed in my last video, or one of my last videos, how I do like the handle on this. However, it does have some shortcomings as far as different grips go. Like, this thing is comfortable for me in all sorts of grips, whether you are cutting in this manner or slicing or push cutting, I guess, or draw cutting, or kind of choked up doing some fine work on something, you know. Of course, I only got one hand here, but I find this handle to be pretty darn comfortable, if not perfect. I think that you get on something like this probably overall more of a positive grip in this fashion, just because I think it's you get a little more traction on this, and then you do have these finger choils that are going to lock you in that much more in all, all grips. However, not quite the most comfortable for some of those. Whereas I find this has really no shortcomings. I don't think that even in a stabbing motion, there's enough. You got a little jimping in the handles here. This doesn't do a whole lot, but then you got some more out here on the blade. Never really bothers me in action, like when I'm actually using the knife or using doing a high torque push cuts. I don't ever find it to be uncomfortable. Though these, honestly, I could do without them. I think if you did grind these off, they would look like crap, so I never have. The G10 version, which is $60 more, with theoretically better blade steel, is probably more comfortable. And it seems I've never actually held one of those G10 versions, just because I never needed to. I have no problem with this. I kind of like it. It's a little lighter weight. It's like I've dropped this on pavement a couple times, and you cannot. There's a couple kind of like perpendicular scratches here that probably aren't even going to turn up. So that's pretty much it out of all that use. I don't throw it in my pocket. This knife, I really don't care a whole lot about keys or coins or whatnot rubbing on it, just because of that handle. It's not titanium or aluminum that's going to get unnecessary wear. So not a problem there. What else was I going to say? Yeah, so this D2, get to the blade. I really like that blade shape, like I said. I think it's a great all-around blade shape. I mean, it's kind of like the Adamas blade, just a lot smaller. Or the Adamas blade, as actually, if you ever compare those two, they look very similar. This is just smaller. I just think it's a great all-around industrial, whatnot blade shape. Just kind of does everything. Doesn't really have a whole lot of weak points. I imagine some blade shapes are better for some things, but as far as an all-around blade goes, I think this was pretty adequate. I think that's why this knife's been around for so long. I think it's a good size. It's a good weight. Good blade shape. Cuts well. They talk about behind the edge thickness, but I don't find any real shortcomings. I have I have a couple, like 3 knives with Scandi grind. They work better on wood. But as far as like comparing head to head with any of these other knives, like just carving on wood, this one doesn't really fall short, at least in my opinion. So D2. Originally these came with 154 cm, which I've always been a fan of. It's what I got on, always had on these bad boys. Which actually, like I've said it before, but that's actually, I think, in my opinion, the perfect handle. D2. I've had great luck with it. I've touched it up a few times, but it's kind of like my sharpest knife that I have out here at the moment. And I've tried to, like I have my military Recon 1. I do have my Voyager. I haven't been really using that a whole lot. That guy, and then this. And then my SOCOM, a little bit with that. Doing a lot of wood cutting, as I keep repeating myself on that. This one has been holding an edge because I was doing the same thing last fall. And since then, since it was new, since I've been using it, I've only touched it up lightly on my sharp maker. And this thing is honestly, like, there's not a burr on it, and there's not a really nick out of it. Granted, I'm just using it on pine out here, Ponderosa, but some of it's hard, dry, dirty, and the knots are gnarly. And I did got a couple chips like in my Mora, which, I mean, I'm sure that nobody's going to doubt that. But my other knives, for the most part, have not. And this one has maintained the sharpest. It's held the sharpest. This one honestly didn't come as sharp as usually I get from Spyderco. And I will need to actually put a full sharp on that pretty soon. But I don't have my sharpener with me, so I will just have to go with it. When I get home, I'll put an edge on it. So yeah, great knife. One of my favorites. Good all around, good weight, good backpacking knife, good hunting knife, I'd imagine. The one weakness as far as like food goes is You can see up in there, anybody that's ever held one of these knows what I'm talking about or has one, is you do have those waffle cutouts. I imagine it'd be kind of gnarly to have blood and what have you, food up in there and or food up in there. So, but usually when I'm cutting, I try to keep everything out in this range. You know, I try not to let anything get really sucked up inside and up in the action or anything. It'll happen. If you're in the kitchen though, it's easy to rinse out. But if you're out here, you know, just kind of avoid it so you can just wipe the blade off and not get anything past the butterfly. But I think that's all I got. If in fact somebody's actually watching this because they're looking for a knife, this is my first recommendation. Knives are spendy. You can get, say, a cold steel Code 4, good option. Probably about $20 less. Comparable. These ones come in S30V now. Benchmade's S30V. I have the one. I think the Crooked River is the only one I have. I love it. The blade still seems great. This D2 is awesome too. So if you come across the Cabela's, that's what they come with. It's a good option. And then, of course, you want to spend a little bit more. You can get the G10 at the 20CV. I think that's fine. I've always kind of thought, it'd be awesome to have a different grip. But you know what? It's like, I got the knife. I'm going to keep it the way it is. Let her ride it out. This is another option. I forgot to look up the dimensions and prices on this, but this is you can get the paramilitary too as well. They're all kind of the same blade lengths. This is a good option. So if this is what strikes your fancy, I love this knife. So it'll, depending on what you use the knife for, whatnot, what your preferences are, good option. And the paramilitary too. And then Benchmade, I don't know. They have some other models that are roughly the same size. And then of course you can go with the bug out, but it's just a little bit more money, or the new bailout, which I'm really liking the looks of that. Actually, I like the kind of like the pommel thing they have. Seems like a good idea. You can use it for stuff. But yeah, I guess that's all I got. It's a great knife. Been around for a while for a reason. Perfect. Thanks again.